Okay, let's begin. I am Lanice Antoine Shelley, and I'll be your host through constructive, healing-based conversations designed to illuminate the adoptee, parents, and the adoption curious. We center the topics around community, mentorship, leadership, and healing, so you get a multi-dimensional view that is ultimately empowering. These are the voices who could not speak when they were young. Hey y'all, if you've seen me on Instagram, I'm in my summer glow phase and I am unapologetic about it. My hair is luscious. Fun fact, I didn't start properly treating and doing my own hair until I was a grown adult because like many Black adoptees, no one showed me how to do my own hair. And because I love you all so much, I'm going to share with you my hair secret. I'm always on the lookout for things you'd love and things that will enhance your well-being inside and out. We Unique Cosmetics sent me their Moisture Lock pomade and scalp and hair therapy oil from their Metamorphosis line, and it's so decadent, light, and nourishing, fam. This has become a hair routine staple. It has a soft lemongrass scent that people comment on when I walk by or when they're doing my hair because now I have boho locks. They also sent me a 15% discount link for you to try their products and hair tutorial service. And Unique Cosmetics is Black owned and operated by a mother and daughter duo dedicated to helping the adoptee community. Check out the link in the show notes. And this is for all ages, fam. So tell your friends. So come on, embark on a hair-loving journey with We Unique World. From interactive workshops to premium products, they're all about empowering you to embrace your unique hair journey. Because remember, all hair is good hair, especially when it's healthy. Hey fam, how was your week? I hope it was good to you. This week was definitely a roller coaster for me, but a highlight was that I got a cat. I had been coveting an animal for years, and after testing my nurturing abilities on plants all summer, and I only killed 5 by the by, I think I've got it. Seriously though, I grew up with cats and a lot of other animals too, so I knew what I was getting myself into. I adopted a 3-year-old calico from Felines and Canine Shelter in Chicago. They've got a gigantic wing where cats roam free and you just follow a few around to see if you connect. What I was looking for in a cat was calm, female, smaller side so they'd not knock things down because there's a lot of space to crawl up and around my plants, and affectionate. I got all of that and then some in this sweet kitty. I named her Harpier from the familiar in Macbeth. And yes, I'm still obsessed with that role and that experience. And I got her a heated perch to watch the wide world through the window, which she loves. Doing this work, though, has given me a deeper perspective on a seemingly perfunctory act like adopting a cat. It was a rigorous process, to say the least, where I had to assess my environment, prepare my home, and evaluate if I had the emotional capacity to support another life. They asked me what I would do if I did not bond with this animal. Oof. I could not help but think about what parents do when they don't bond with the child. I've committed to the sweet purrs for affection and the atomic bomb shits she takes that coat the air with Purina Premium cat dung. My life will never be the same. Okay, let's get to it. I have been waiting for so long to launch this series of episodes. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. But I wanted to observe November being National Adoption Month. So here we are. I facilitated these conversations with adoptees where I give them core questions and they sit down with their parental figures without me and they talk. Many of these questions they have never asked before. My intention is to have myself and these adoptees who dare to talk to their parents about adoption be expanders for you. Expanders are people who show you new possibilities for where you can expand into your life. This is the beginning of a new era in many ways for people. I have observed that the topic of adoption is taboo in many homes. In many homes that adoption has occurred. It is the wound and also the gateway to healing, to have these conversations. This conversation is so profoundly extraordinary because you have a Black man speaking to his white father about fatherhood, racism, and his adoption. Oh, it's so good. First up, we have Lionel Boisvert and his father, Richard.
You guys are all set. And you guys can hear yourself, right? You can hear yourself?
I can hear Lionel. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay,
Perfect.
good.
I'm out.
All
Have
right.
fun.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Lionel.
You're welcome. All right. How you doing?
I'm fine. I'm ready.
You're ready?
Mm-hmm.
You went through the list of questions and everything?
Oh, yeah, and I have a list of answers typed in from thinking about things over the last couple of weeks.
All right. Well, let's just jump right into it. Let's go for to the first one, which is, what prompted you to adopt?
You know, that's not as easy a question as I thought when I really started thinking about it. Because in a lot of ways, I think that was started years before I ever made that decision. And not necessarily by me, by, we'll say, a higher source, like God.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me share some things. Where I grew up, there were no Black people there until 1968. So I grew up in a very white society. Then I left that area in 69 and went to school. And that spring of 1970 was when we left school, there were three of us, two whites and one Black in a car driving from Florida to Massachusetts and Maine. It was during the riots of Ohio State and Kent State University. A lot of shootings were going on. And as we're traveling, we're stopping for gas in Florida. The interstate wasn't there at the time. And we had to go to side roads. And when we went to get gas, those men looked at us. And if their eyes would have been guns, we would have been killed because there was a Black with us. Traveled to Charlotte, North Carolina in a hotel the three of us stayed in. This little old lady looking at us, the same attitude, disgust, hatred. Then in 73, I, graduated, found a job in Lee County, South Carolina. That was an almost all Black school district. In the school I worked in, there were 4 adult whites and 2 children that were white. Everybody else was Black. 75, Attorney William B. James and his wife moved next door. A Black couple, retired. Got friends with him, and the first time I met him, I looked at him and I said, this is going to be an interesting relationship. And for the next 13 years, it was quite that and then some. Joined St. Jude's in 1980, founded for Black Catholics. So from an all-white situation over the years, it transitioned. My life transitioned into a mixed situation. In 81, I joined a little community called Maranatha Faith Community, part of the Catholic Church, but a little community in Sumter. And they were working with Thai and Vietnamese refugees. I spent a lot of time with them. And after I did that Cursillo weekend in 82, where we'll say the Holy Spirit became very active in my life. That's where Jose came from that we can experience. And
do you want to go into Jose's situation, before you finish answering the question, and how that kind of played a part into your decision for me?
Well, okay. Jose came as a Haitian refugee he left Haiti in 1981. And
before you continue, I just want to, just clarify to Lanice that Jose is not my biological brother.
No, he is not.
Okay, so you can continue.
And he's also more than 20 years older than you are. So Jose was in a Haitian refugee camp he went to jail for a year in Lexington, Kentucky, because all the Haitians that had come by on the shanty boat and landed on the shores of Miami were arrested and eventually sent to Lexington Penitentiary in Lexington, Kentucky. So he was in prison for 12 months. From there, the judge said, you did nothing wrong. And that's not just him, but that whole group. They need to release you. So they released him to a Haitian refugee center in New York. And from there, I had gone through a refugee resettlement workshops. And the group that I was with had Vietnamese and Thai. And so my decision was to do that. But I thought the individual that was going to come would be like 10 years old. And it turned out that Jose was missing 2 weeks from being 18. A lot of difference. So when I got the phone call on the 13th of December of 82, they said, we have a 17-year-old Haitian. Will you take him? And if you don't, we'll deport him and he'll probably be killed because he was part of the revolution in Haiti. I said, do I have any time to think about it? They said, well, you got not much. So I called the friends and they said, what are you going to, she said, we already know about him. What are you going to do? And I just said, I'll take him. Called, and the next day he flew in from Poughkeepsie, New York. And that was in December of 82. And from there, they told me he had to be in school. Well, he's 18 years old. He has no papers because he'd been to school in Haiti, but when he left for his life. And he had no paperwork. So I finally found a program at Central Carolina for GED. And as long as he had a 4th grade high school equivalency in English, they would take him. And it turns out he had like a 4th grade, 4.5 grade level. And so they took him. And so that's where he went to school until he got an associate degree in mechanical technology or something like that. From there, in June of 87 is when I had a Pentecost experience in church. I went to church and I don't have a clue what went on in church because the Lord was telling me that I was going to be adopting a child.
So what is Pentecost? Just
Pentecost Sunday.
Just so we're on the same.
Well,
page
when you go back to the history of the church, it's when the Holy Spirit descended on the apostles, and that was the beginning of the church. And it was on that day that it happened, which happens every year, but this was in June that particular year. And after that, I was concerned because I know the attitudes that were going on at that time and still going on as far as racism and those kinds of things. And I was really concerned for a young child. And I wasn't sure quite what to do. So there was an individual at work, her name was Bobby, and she was adopted. She was adopted by Black parents. And she was older than I was. And I spoke to her, And after our conversation, baby, she said, you know, what you do in the house is what's going to determine what's going to go on. It's the things that you do at home are what's important. And she was very supportive. And that's when I finally made the decision to pursue adoption after I spoke to her. And that's how things got started.
So just going back to the question. So what prompted you to adopt? There were some other circumstances, such as, you know, you were previously married.
Yeah.
And, you know, didn't have any children with your wife or ex-wife at the time.
That's correct.
Was that part of the decision or rationale behind you initially wanting to adopt? Had you always wanted kids, and because, you know, the situation didn't work out, was there still a void that needed to be filled? I'm just, you know,
I was
trying to place myself in your shoes for this.
Yeah, I was open to that, but it wasn't until that experience in church that really pushed it forward to begin the process of doing something about it. I've always been around kids. I've taught in schools for years.
Yeah,
and
so I just want to make sure that
it's not like I didn't like kids,
but it wasn't you know, just had an annulment from my wife. You know, there goes my opportunity to have a kid, type deal.
Well, you know, you always think about having kids even if you're not married, and that to me was not an issue. It wasn't anything that I was going to do.
So you had always wanted to have a kid, at least one. Okay.
Oh yeah.
That's where I was going with it. And also trying to put myself back in your shoes. It would have been easy, or easier, should I say, to have adopted a white kid or someone from that was American or a citizen. Mm-hmm. Correct?
It would have been a lot easier. But I can tell you that I also thought about Jose, and I said, you know, maybe it would be best just to adopt a child that comes from a similar background, because Jose was in our family. And even though there was over 20 years difference in ages, that had an influence as far as why to do that.
Okay.
So
initially, where was your head at? Like, adopting an American, or did it go straight?
Well,
to a Haitian?
No, okay. At DSS, the head of the adoption portion of DSS was a Black woman, and she was against transracial adoptions. So I knew that trying to adopt a Black child through that agency most likely would not work, because she would probably put a whole bunch of barriers to prevent that from happening. From there, I joined an adoption support group, COAC, and the individuals in the adoption support group kind of guided me to that program in Minnesota, which was tied to the daycare center that you came from.
And I never asked you this, but you know, just going back to Jose.
Mm-hmm.
He came in 17. You took him in. You took him in as a foster parent.
Yeah, he was not adoptable.
Right. So, what are the rules? Since he was close to being 18, like what are the rules as far as, okay, 18, you're considered an adult, and you know how you looked at the situation. Especially because you weren't planning on getting a 17-year-old as a foster, parent. What do they tell you about that as far as, okay, once they turn 18, like what that means?
Well, it's a little different with refugees. They didn't cut you off at 18 when you were a refugee. I think they cut you off at 21. And so that really wasn't an issue.
Okay.
And I didn't have any plans. I figured that when it was time for him to move on and get his own place, he would know when that was time. It wasn't up to me. It was up to him. And he stayed with me for 5 years, I think, until probably December of '88. So that's it's about 6 years before he got an apartment and moved out to that. And then you came in May.
All right. So just going back to the question again, just to answer it fully, what percentage would you say, or if you had to give percentages, to the reasons, whether it was spiritual, whether it was personal fulfillment of, wanting to have a child, influence from the adoption group, influences from family, like if you had to give percentages to the decision, like what percentages would you place on how you went about making it?
The biggest percentage would go on the spiritual aspect, because I wasn't, it's not like I had to do this.
Exactly.
It's not like I didn't have that gumption or whatever you want to call it until that experience. And it was after that experience that I started moving towards that. And so that has the majority of the support, or whatever you want to call it. We'll say over 50%.
Hey, I want to share with you something that has changed my life. It's more like my therapist. Why is she so important? Well, because I want to win in this life. I want to break through the carousel of stories I've compiled that hold me back, that keep me from expanding into my full potentiality. Stories of unworthiness, not enoughness, and even stories of questioning why I am here. I also want to stop dumping my unsorted feelings on the people around me and reacting with the same behavioral patterns that keep me stuck. Conversations with my therapist have made me more confident, clearer in my intention, and more centered in my spirit. That is why I am elated that we are sponsored by BetterHelp, where you can, from wherever you happen to be right now, match with a therapist tailored to your exact needs. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. Someone who you can text at any time and schedule online for either a chat, Zoom, or phone call. And if it turns out that your therapist isn't the right fit, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional cost. Visit the link in the show notes, betterhelp.com, when they were young, to get 10% off the first month. You need to click the link in the show notes in order to get the 10% discount. I want to see you win, beloved. Let's do it together. Visit the link, betterhelp.com, when they were young.
Okay. So, that segues into the second question, which is how long was the overall process, you know, for getting it completed?
Okay, well, I'll give you the quickie and then I'll explain it.
All right.
It took about 23 months. Started in June of 1987, and I went to pick you up in May of 1989. The first part of that has to do with the home study, where a social worker comes to your house and visits with you over an extended period of time, 7, 8, 9 months, check the house out, investigates, and does all that. They usually show up once a month to do that. And after that process, then they make a decision as to whether or not they think you're going to be a fit parent or parents.
And real quick, so that was in 87.
That was 87 and 88.
All right, started in 87. What were the rules? And I'm just, curious, what were the rules as far as, okay, we need you to be, whether it's, this is the timeline for a single parent, a single household versus, okay, this is the rules for married or partners at the time. I don't know what they called it. Were there any distinctions with any of that, or
not that I can recall? All I know is males adopting. I only knew one other person in South Carolina that had done that, and he had did it with older, I think 3 older teenagers.
Mhm.
That was the only person that I knew in South Carolina. So it's not something that happened regularly. It was definitely the exception to the rule.
Okay, I didn't know if there was going to be any additional steps or
Well, I'm not sure.
Barriers that they would have thrown at you because of the circumstance.
I'm not sure about this portion. I had to have a psychological evaluation. That was part of. Now I don't know if that was because I was male or if they did that for couples and single females and white males, or just males. I'm not sure, but I did have to do a psychological evaluation, which I did.
And at that time, had they asked you if you were looking to do a transracial adoption, or did that not come up?
No, not really, because you go through that process first, whether or not they think that would be a fit parent, and after that is when you make a decision as to what route you're going to take.
Because and how old were you at that time?
30, I guess somewhere around 35, 34, 35.
Okay, because I know there's like an age restriction now, at least.
There's an age.
Was there one at that?
I think it's in the 40s or late 40s or middle 40s. I'm not sure because I've not been part of that for a long time, but most agencies have a maximum age that will accept.
What was the min at that time when you started?
I don't. It was the same. I think it would have been in the 40s somewhere. Okay. Like 45, 46 in that age range.
But from like at least 35 through 40. That's what you would say.
You mean as far as the maximum?
No, the min and max, as far as, okay, you want to adopt, you have to be at least 35.
Oh, no, 30. No, you could be younger than that. It just so happens that's the age I was. I don't think there's any rule on minimums, though you have to be at least 21 and, a responsible individual. But it's not something that really was discussed.
All right, so about a 2-year process. And from there, what was the support system like? How were you supported by family and friends, during this process?
Well, very well. I spoke to your aunt last week about that, just to check out if my gut feeling was correct. And she said that she had one concern, and it was your age, because Jose was so much older. But she said it didn't take long. I figured out that that age didn't mean any, you were able to make the adjustments that you needed to make.
And you were talking about Aunt Claudette, your sister?
Yeah, Aunt Claudette.
Your sister? Who's your sister?
My sister. I spoke to her over the weekend, last weekend, because I wanted to make sure that my gut feeling was right, because they never expressed any opposition to it. So I said, let me talk to them. And she said, that was a long time ago. But he said, but the only thing that I can think of is I didn't know if you were going to be able to handle that age group.
So it's just interesting. So no one really tried to talk you down from this, because
no,
I'm thinking back to.
There's one person that I valued a lot that did not support me. And that was my next door neighbor, the attorney. He supported Jose coming, but he was not in favor of me adopting a younger child. And I never found out why.
Was it a younger child or a younger Black child?
No, basically, I don't think it bothered him that you were going to be Black, but with him, that's my sister now. With him, I don't know why.
Because I'm just looking. I mean, I'm 34 right now.
Mm-hmm.
Have a 2-year-old. It's going to be 3 in December, and I'm like, okay, 35s, especially for our generation, it's not that old to be starting a family. So that's why it's interesting that he would have more of an issue with the age instead of like the race. So
see, that was never an issue that was brought up, so I can't really answer that.
Yeah, it just seems to me, especially during the 80s, that people wouldn't have tried to talk you out of it, in my mind, especially in Sumter, South Carolina, a deep red conservative state, where it just seems that they would have tried to advise that it'd be easier, to just adopt a white child, or, go down that right, as far as just making it easy on you.
It was never asked. It was never indicated. I mean, the church was very supportive, whites and Blacks, either way. Friends were very supportive. And, your Aunt Frances and Aunt Vanessa were extremely supportive. And as you well know, they were part of your bringing up.
Yeah.
But my Pop James was the one that was not supportive. And like I said, he died 3 months before you came. So there wasn't, he never was able to see what I did. But he was, very supportive of Jose.
Right. So you talk about Aunt Frances and Aunt Vanessa and Uncle Anthorus. What role did they play as far as the overall process in helping you out, and bringing me in ultimately?
Well, they were really part of the family, or I was part of their family, and they were part of my family way before you came. And they were there. Aunt Vanessa and Aunt Frances were there a lot for the mama part, since I didn't have a wife. And they were there to help raise you in some respects. When I needed someone to keep you, they did that, not, from time to time when it was appropriate. Uncle Anthorus was, whenever I was not around because of work or whatever, and you were older, as you well know, I had him check up on you and see what was going on while I wasn't available.
Did they ever advise you as far as um, how hard it would be as a single parent? You know, I mean, they had multiple kids, um, and Francis and Vanessa, and again, as a parent now with just one, I have experienced like how difficult it can be, just trying to raise one with two.
Uh-huh.
So did someone ever advise you like, look, it's not going to be, I don't know what you thought it might look like, once I came, but
We'll talk about that after. There's another question that has to do with that.
yeah, but I like, again, only about almost 3 years into this parenthood, but I would advise like single parents that it's going to be difficult, and it's hard, having a partner to go through it, as it is. So I just am curious if anyone ever told you.
Nobody ever told me, but I knew that it was not going to be easy. But you don't always do things that are easy. You do things that you feel like you're supposed to do. And I didn't get too much rest for years, but I did the best that I could to make sure that you were involved with people, involved in teams, and that you weren't missing out on too much, which meant that I had to be the secretary, the person, the taxi driver, and the nursemaid, and everything else. But difficult, yes, very. I look back and I said, how did I do that? And I say, by the grace of God, because it sure wasn't me.
Was there any time during that process where you felt like, let me try to, date or find a wife to help me with this or anything during that span?
Not really.
So what it boils down to, it sounds like you had a plan as far as just raising, just taking the mentality of, the village raising the child mentality.
This is true. And this is how you were raised in a lot of ways. It wasn't just by me, it was by the village. Good African proverb.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely look back and I'm grateful that I've had so many good people in my life that were part of the family, part of the church, extended family. So I was fortunate in that regard. So it sounds like it was definitely done intentionally.
Oh, yes. A lot of it was done intentionally. Even the professionals that you would see, to make sure that there was a balance in their backgrounds, that you wouldn't see just white individuals, but you would see a mixture of individuals. So you at least would know that, hey, I can become like this person, as opposed to all you can be is this. And that was from the get-go that I realized that you needed to be a part of the Black community if you were to survive and learn how to deal in both cultures, not just the white culture, but also in the African American culture.
That's interesting. Did someone tell you that you needed to go down that route and have those things set up. Because even looking back at, how the house was set up and decorated, the Haitian art and books that you provided, all of that, was that all from you, or did people tell you, you need to incorporate these things into his life?
It was not told by anyone. That was part of me. And it had to do, I guess, a lot with work, since I dealt with African American children. And that, you kind of, you realize that's where they got their support, was from their families and friends.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't from the white community, though you got support from the white community as well as the African American community. Think about your soccer team. When you did something or went somewhere in soccer where I could not go because Warren was not allowed, the mothers would tell me, we'll look out for him, don't worry. And so you had a lot of people looking out for you. And it wasn't just from one culture, it was from both cultures.
No, I definitely feel blessed in that regards, that I had a lot of great people in my life, a lot of a good support system, was involved in a lot of things that, like you said, people looked out for me, and, had good friends that that lasted for many years, and was able to be close with their families. So I definitely, count my blessings for that. I was in a very fortunate circumstance, and, want to thank you for that. But it was just, it was interesting that it was because of like things, the extracurricular activities, sports, karate, and all of that, that I was involved in. And just overall, just being a great community. So not everybody's just as fortunate to have that, in their lives. So
Let me share one thing, how I figured out that you were a soccer player. When I went to pick you up in Haiti, I noticed that you would kick whatever you could find, whether it was a tin can, whether it was a rock, you would kick it. And I said to myself, I got to get him involved in soccer, because that's his sport.
Yeah, no.
And that started from when you were 3, because they had a little preschool soccer thing at the Y.
Yeah, I remember that. I was, I think we had blue shirts with the big Y on it.
Sounds right.
Yeah. But yeah. So overall, in your eyes, you had basically full support by family and friends. So
I was very fortunate.
Yeah, helped out immensely.
And even when, well, I'll share that later, because it comes in, it comes in the questions.
All right. So let's move on. So what really changed in your life after I arrived?
Wow. For about a year and a half before you came, my mother came to live with me. She would go between my sister and myself. And
how old was she at that time?
She was about 77. And she stayed with me until she died. And well, with us, because that happened after you arrived. And I know you remember that.
Which was what age?
You were 3.
No, what age was
70. She was 78. She had dementia, and she was diagnosed with dementia a month before she died. And I had to kind of balance her and you and work and a lot of other things because
Right.
she was jealous of you because everybody was paying so much attention to you that she was jealous. And she was going into her infancy.
Right.
And that was an interesting time, a difficult time, but you learn how to make adjustments. And that didn't last very long because she passed away in August, so it wasn't really long. But then I also had to apply for paternity leave, and I was the first one in my school district to do that. Because when you came, I didn't want to have to work all the time because I wanted to spend time with you in transition. And I got paternity leave, and the way I worked it is I would go to work and bring you with me and work in the morning because I was a supervisor. And you would go to the different offices and entertain the staff, and they loved it. How the superintendent allowed me to do that, I don't know, but I was grateful. And so in the morning,
I remember that.
Yeah, I could tell you something that might embarrass you, but I'll keep it. I won't do it.
And I think I know what you're talking about, but
I'm sure you do.
But yeah, I remember, riding in with you, playing in the hallways with the trucks, and the tractor, and
they had a baby shower for you at the district office.
Yeah, and to hear you say, "How did someone allow me to do this?" That's interesting because I was the only one. I don't remember
you were the only one. I never happened again, and it probably never will. But you were the only one, and that did that for about a month, and then I found a preschool program at one of the Black Presbyterian churches. And you were in that program about 6 weeks. That's how long it was. And you were with 3 and 4 year olds. And to this day, I still see your teacher. And about a month ago, I had been promising to give her a picture of you in the program because she never had one. And this is 31 years ago. I found some pictures and I said, now let me call, because I knew her husband because we did prison ministry together. Called and I said, I have that picture that I've promised you years ago. How do I get it to you? So I finally put it in the mail and she got it and she let me know that she received it and she was very happy about it because she would ask about you from time to time, Miss Johnson. So after 6 weeks, we took a trip to Minnesota for you to meet your brother. The end of July.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that as far as
how I found out about it.
How you found out about the Haitian reunion, and also how you found out that I actually had a biological brother as well. And how we would unite for the first time. And what that was like, from the parents' view.
Okay. After you came to South Carolina with me, I contacted the agency to find out if you had any brothers and sisters that were in the States. And they got back to me and told me yes. And they told me about Andre. And I said, would you contact his parents to see if they're willing for them to meet? And, it would be not just one time, but, to see if they were willing to do that. And they were. And so the end of July, we took a flight to Minnesota. We stayed with a couple that came on that. When I flew down to get you, that this was an agency trip, which was not planned. I'll tell you about that later too. And they told me that we could stay with them, and they were adopting 2 kids. But when you came, you were the only child that was ready. The 2 kids that they were adopting weren't ready yet, paperwork wise. And so we stayed there. I don't remember their names. I can visualize them, but I don't remember their names. You were friends with the little boy, and he was had a lot of emotional problems, and they finally they couldn't deal with them, and they had to give them back. Probably within a year of that. But we stayed with them, and then it was like a little mini Haitian reunion, I think, in a park.
Mm-hmm.
And we went there, and Andre was a lot smaller, and Preston was smaller than you, even though you two were the same age. You were
tall. How old was I at that time, and how old
you were
was
3, and Andre was 2. Preston was 3, and your sister was a year and a half, I think, something like that. Anyhow, when you met, you took over. You were dominant. Took their toys. Andre was crying and screaming and hollering, and it kind of went that way. But that was,
that wasn't my fault. That wasn't my fault. Hey, that wasn't my fault. I was a single child, so look, I wasn't taught about sharing. So,
well, what did you do in that 6-week program with all those other little 3 or 4-year-olds?
I don't know. What did the teachers tell you?
Well, the teacher told me you didn't say one word the whole summer. You listened and did what they asked you to do, but you never said a word.
And also, to mention, during that 6 weeks, I was still just speaking Creole, correct?
Exactly, Creole and French, because I would speak French to you, and Jose would speak Creole to you.
Right. So that's one of the big reasons why, I don't know if you told them beforehand that, okay, he doesn't speak
they knew that you can speak French and you could speak, that you were just in the process of picking up English.
Right.
Okay, from there, when we came back from Minnesota, my mother I had people watching out for her while we were gone, and she was deteriorating quite quickly. And within 10 days, she was gone. And I remember the situation the day when she died. I was going out to play with you in the backyard, and she was going through the death rattle, as they call it. Breathing was very labored. And we went back in to check on her, and that's when she kind of passed. And you always looked at that room as that's the dead person's room. I ain't going in there. And whenever you had sleepovers, you tell the kids, don't go over there.
Those were some, it was some scary times. Like it definitely traumatized me.
Okay. I'm going to tell you a few stories that happened. I needed to take you to Toomey Hospital to have your stool analyzed for parasites. And so I made an appointment. You know what I'm talking about?
When I first got here?
When you first got in that first week.
Mm-hmm.
And went there, and you thought you could do whatever you wanted. That I can walk, like I can go wherever I want. And I said, no, you're staying with me. And you started to cry. So I picked you up, and all the people in the back, they were looking. I said, he doesn't need an audience. So he did what we needed to do, go in the parking lot, and you're screaming up a storm. And this white woman looks at me and she says, what are you doing to that child? And I said, that's my son. He's having a tantrum and we're going home. I knew something was going to happen. I didn't find out until about 5 or 6 years later at a PTA meeting at the school that woman reported me. But luckily, because they knew me and they knew the situation, they didn't investigate. But it was at a PTA meeting. She says, "Oh, let me tell you about what happened." It was one of the social workers. And I looked at her and I said, I knew she was going to do something. Okay, tantrums. How to deal with tantrums. This is how I dealt with it, because every time you wanted something and I said no, you would throw a tantrum.
Now I know where Chloe gets it from.
Yeah, from you. What I would do is I would ignore the behaviors and not feed the behavior.
Just what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. And sometimes I put you in your room and I said, you need to stay there. And when you tried to get out, I barricaded the room, and then you would hit me and hit me and hit me until you were so tired, you just fell down and fell asleep. After 6 weeks of not feeding the behavior, they disappeared and you couldn't do it anymore. You couldn't rise to the occasion. But see, what I see today is that people give in to that because they're making so much noise. I didn't do that because I knew from my own educational background what you're not supposed to do and what you are supposed to do. And so that's after 6 weeks, it disappeared. It never came back.
Yeah, no, that's parenting 101. You know, it's like you got that fork in the road. It's going to go one way or another. So,
something that has been very important was being flexible. Mm-hmm. You can't be tunnel vision raising children. You've got to be open, because some things aren't going to work and some things are, and you have to kind of figure out, what.
Exactly.
And so flexibility is very important.
Every child's different too.
Exactly.
Wow, what a powerful start. Oh my gosh. Here are my reflections. 1. Find the balance. Early on, Richard realized that Lionel needed to be plugged into the Black community in order to thrive. This is a prime example in setting up a loved one to win. How do we set up our loved ones to win? It may take initial discomfort, ingenuity, and imagination, but if we observe their true nature and extend past ourselves, we can successfully create an enriching environment. 2. Identify where your community is on the spectrum of anti-racism. It is imperative. Even if your child is of the same hue, really be honest with yourself about what external influences will also be raising your child. And as we always say here, we strive to be anti-racists. 3. There are support groups that you can join that will be invaluable as you grow your family. There are a great many groups on Facebook. Find out how you can connect from your agency, and or go to my resource page at laniceantoineshelley.com. Remember, I gave Lionel the questions, but it was up to him to where the questions led. What a beautiful conversation. This is truly one of my favorite conversations, and I'm so excited to share the other half with you next week, where I also check in with Lionel to get his take on how it went. So yesterday, October 30th, was Adoptee Remembrance Day, where we acknowledge all of those adoptees that have committed suicide. Suicide rates are the highest amongst adoptees. I myself have a propensity for melancholy, but I work hard to alchemize my pain into medicine. I encourage you to nurture your mental health and check in with one another. Another beautiful episode. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to my guest today. If you liked this episode, the best way to support me and this work is to write an iTunes review, a 5-star review. This helps us reach the top of searches and helps more people to find us. And if you personally want to connect, please reach out on Instagram or Facebook. And I have some great resource material on my website at laniceantoineshelley.com. So go on over there too. Until next we meet, go gently and have courage, my love.